Well, welcome everyone to Let's Talk Real Estate Investing. In this series, we speak to real estate investing professionals about their strategies. We also speak to, real estate experts about their services that they offer, and we talk about process, tools, and strategies in this session. So, I'm Debbie Balfour, and I'm a real estate investor, and I'm a real estate investing success coach. I help as a coach real estate investors who are feeling stuck, overwhelmed, and don't know where to go next to figure out what their personalized real estate investing strategy is. I help them to build that strategy and to build in systems and tools in order to scale efficiently so that you can start enjoying financial freedom and time freedom, which is what we're all looking for. So today I have my special guest today that I'm really excited to introduce to you. We've got Brandon Lawson and Chris Barrett, and they're here to speak about, and I forgot the topic now. What we said it was.
Investing
What
with
is it,
purpose.
Brandon?
Investing with purpose.
Investing with purpose. Yes,
Yeah.
investing with
Or any
purpose.
variation of that.
So they're here to speak to you about investing in purpose, and we'll dig into what that means. I'm really excited about the topic. It really touches my heart what these gentlemen have been doing, and I wanted to, this is where when we speak about personalized real estate investing, that you should be looking in your strategy at how you can bring in not just how do I make money, but what's my dreams, what's my goals, what's my world vision? Would I love to solve world hunger? And how can I incorporate that into my strategy? Like looking at those values, like what are your philanthropic, dreams that you would like? How can you bring that all into the strategy instead of just picking something because it's just to make money, right? And we're all doing this in our lives, not just the money is a means to a passion. So why don't we start bringing that passion instead of waiting for that money to be realized? Like, how can we start realizing it as we're investing? So that's why I'm really excited to speak to Chris and Brandon. So I'll hand over to both of you. To Brandon, we'll start with you, and then over to Chris to introduce yourself, a little about who you are, something interesting about yourself, and then we'll get into how you got into real estate investing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again for having both of us on here. We've been so nose to the grindstone with these projects that we haven't really got much of a chance to discuss any of this stuff with people and to basically introduce ourselves and start putting some content out and jumping on some podcasts. And
Yay, so I'm the first.
So I'm happy to get that rolling, and I'm happy it's with you. Yeah, so I grew up on Vancouver Island in BC here, and went to high school here and kind of attached myself with maybe not the most ideal friend group, as many young boys do at times, especially when you live in a smaller town. So we were bored and managed to find lots of trouble to get into, and that was all fun and games when we were younger. And as we got older, I just started to kind of notice the seriousness of the path that we were walking down, and a lot of the people that I grew up with, kind of went to that next level with it all and ended up going down a much worse path. And it was appealing for me too at that age, because I always kind of found myself not really jiving with the sort of conventional systems that were all sort of boxed in our school system. I was always kind of struggling with that, and it wasn't that it was difficult. I just caught myself uninterested. And I think a lot of young men,
most boys, yeah,
yeah, a lot of young boys, they come across that, and I think that's one of those sort of gateways into sort of making some bad decisions, is because we're not really aligned with the programs that we have here. And I just kind of struggled with it a lot. And don't get me wrong, I had lots of fun, and I did make some great friends along the way, of course. And living on Vancouver Island, it's beautiful here. Of course, I took it for granted at that age. That's all changed now, of course. As we get older, we start to notice the gifts that we've had all along, right? So yeah, that basically that sort of lifestyle led me to this idea that, again, I think this is most cases, is you're told, hey, if you're not going to do well in school and you're not going to take this seriously, then you're going to just have to get a trade and you're going to have to just work. And that's you're going to be blue collar. That's your life. And you sort of get this, you sort of box yourself after hearing it at all angles, right? So I kind of went down that path of really believing that was sort of it for me. Like that's the life I have to live now. I sort of sealed my fate. So it seemed. And I think like most people, but yeah, I did go down that path. I was working trades in my late teens and early 20s. Um, and then I discovered the book that I think most people discover, which is Rich Dad Poor Dad. And read that book, and me being of a bit of an extreme nature, I read this book and I was like, oh my gosh, that's the answer right there. So I literally like quit my job a day later. I was like, peace out, I'm gonna go be rich now. Um, and and it was really fun. I'm a little bit stubborn too, so I had a lot of people around me being like, "Okay, we'll see you when you're begging for your job back in 2 months, right?" And I wouldn't advise anyone to obviously just like,
Do that.
to burn the ships is one thing and to commit to something, but this was like such an extreme because at the time I had no experience in this world, so I didn't realize the length that it takes to start to build this knowledge and to reprogram your mind to be able to even be successful on this entrepreneurial path.
Mhm.
But I did it anyways. I burned the ships, and it was a real struggle because we spent, a lot of time. I was about 24 years old getting into real estate, and spent quite a long time just not really knowing what we're doing, getting rejected at all angles, trying to raise capital, not succeeding. It was a tough reality check. But again, with my extreme nature, I just kind of like I was pretty persistent about it, and then eventually landed us into some success on a small scale in our early 20s. And we pulled off some successful deals, and then it just kind of ballooned from there, and led me to some awesome partnerships. And yeah,
Well,
so
you were
that's
young though, so your risk tolerance was super high. You have
it was.
years
Yeah,
to make it up if that didn't
right.
work. So
It
I
was
wouldn't
perfect.
advise anyone my age to burn the ship. And
No,
Brandon's, in case anyone doesn't know what Brandon's referring to by burning the ship, this is Napoleon. This is from Napoleon. Well, Napoleon burnt the ship so that they had to win, or else they couldn't get home. They couldn't get off the
yeah,
island and take off.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, it can be a great strategy on a certain scale to, to make sure that you don't have an escape route, because if you do, you're going to use it. So for me, it really worked. But again, you have to factor in where you are at in life too, and be strategic there as well. I was 24 years old and I didn't have kids or anything at that point in my life, so it was easy for us to do.
Oh yeah.
And shouldn't say easy. It came with challenges for sure, but it was a lot easier than if
That's the time to
had
do it.
yeah,
Like I
100.
picked up and went and worked on cruise ships and said,
Yeah,
bye-bye job too. Like, I've always wanted to do this. I'm off.
yeah, yeah. No, that's awesome.
So, so that's awesome. Great story, Brandon. And I want to
Yeah,
hear more about, we'll talk more as
yeah,
we talk
absolutely.
through your strategy. So over to you, Chris. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Thanks, Debbie. My name is Chris, Chris Barrett. I grew up in Nanaimo also, though I had no idea who Brandon was at that time. And I moved to Vancouver, went more of the traditional route in the white collar world, going into finance, became a branch compliance manager, stockbroker. And funny enough, when COVID hit, I had been house hacking, not knowing what that term was, simply in order to be able to pay bills in Vancouver, putting in rentals in the basements of the houses that we lived in. And when COVID hit, I really, really started to enjoy working from home. It was the first time that I didn't have to commute downtown. I didn't have to worry about packing a lunch. I was like, wow, there's opportunities to play with the cats, play with the kids, right? Do laundry during the day. And that started me thinking, well, what if I don't want to go back into an office? And from there, I talked to a few people that I knew who were involved in real estate. That got me involved in the Keyspire Group, which is probably one of the bigger real estate groups in Canada. And at that time, I thought I just spent a whole bunch of money on a really fancy Facebook group because there was no live connections, no nothing. And it was like, what is this? Like, wow. And about a year and a half later is when, as COVID started to lighten up, we started looking more, like my wife and I, at what the next iteration looked like. And that took us back over to Vancouver Island, having grown up in Nanaimo, you know, being not 24, having 2 kids, and a big Vancouver mortgage, and thinking about, it's not getting any cheaper to live in Vancouver. Would I consider moving back to Vancouver Island when we retire? So then that led us over, we spent a month touring the island pretty much, and ended up back in Nanaimo, purchased a rental property in Nanaimo, and built a lot of connections over the next year there. And that's how I ended up running into Brandon. Brandon was working for another company at that time. And we met, we got along really well. I think we were very aligned in the spiritual side of things. There was a lot of discussions about Carl Jung and where we wanted to see ourselves go. And I totally remember that night that we were all standing out in front of a house in Duncan, chatting back and forth, and we ended up in this off tangent conversation about, when we're rich and successful, what would we do? How would we give back? Right. And I think that ties in very nicely with what you opened with, right? Because I think in the end, we're all looking for real estate as, yes, it's a freedom vehicle, but for many of us, we're also looking for something bigger than that, right? I don't know a lot of mom and pop investors who sit down and go, I want to be a slumlord, right? That's not in our repertoire, right? We're looking to give back into the communities that we invest in. So we had this conversation, and Brandon threw out some ideas, and I threw out some ideas, and then, as often happens, we all went back to our real life, and we weren't rich and successful at that point. So we were like, okay, fine, we'll reconnect later on. And fast forward about a year and a half or so later, I was going through some stuff at work. I decided to go on stress leave. Probably the best thing I could ever do, right? I know, the idea of a sabbatical, very few people get to actually take it. And so I actively encourage anyone who's call it a midlife crisis, call it a midlife awakening, whatever you want to call it, but reach that place in your life where you're thinking, man, there's got to be something more to this. And it just happened at that time, Brandon was also going through some stuff, which I'll let him share about.
I just bought a motorcycle though.
Was that?
I just bought a motorcycle. That was my midlife crisis.
That's right. Yes. Well, you posted some stuff about a place that you were looking to buy, and we're looking to activate those dreams and give backs a lot faster, right? And 100%. That led us to some conversations, which led us to eventually where we are now.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about this. Let's talk about the strategy, because we're hinting to it. So let's get into it. What's investing with purpose? What is that purpose? And and then also the roles you guys, each of you, play in your partnership.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll let you go.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, of course. So I mean, investing with purpose can obviously mean a lot of different things. But for me in particular, it kind of came down to, just kind of moving back a bit, we talked about just sort of, no one's excited to just be the slumlord and make a buck. That's why, you see a lot of people trying to get into real estate, because it is a vehicle to find your way out of the rat race. So, and I've been there, done that kind of thing, and did the standard sort of, real estate model. We did these with JVs, LPs, things like that, did apartment buildings, single family properties. And it was cool, it was fun. I learned a lot, never want to minimize what we did. But it was missing something. And I think for me, if something lacks a real mission and purpose, then I have a really tricky time really getting into it. And not to say I wasn't committed, I just really felt there was something lacking, and I needed to find a way to change that. And I didn't know what that was going to be. I knew it was going to have to be something that was close to my heart and that I really believed in. And, there was always this kind of idea that maybe it would be around addiction recovery. I don't know what or how, And I've had my own struggles with addiction, my early 20s, and that lasted quite a long time. A lot of that, changed as I got older. And then specifically when I had my daughter was when I completely went sober. But the big catalyst was actually losing one of my best friends. So we had a pretty tight group when we were in high school. We had a lot of friends, but we had kind of a core solid group. And one of those friends was really struggling quite severely, to the point where we were getting like very worried for his life. And it was in his 30s, early 30s. And another good friend of mine kind of got together and said, we got to do something and help him out here where we can. And we planned a bit of an intervention because, of course, getting anyone to go in through the recovery process, you're never going to force someone's hand at that. It has to be them willing and determined to do it. So we had a bit of a conversation, see if we could get them there, and we managed to succeed in that. Got him into a rehabilitation center on the mainland. He did really great for a month. It was incredible to see the progress he was making. And then, came back a little bit early. We wanted him to stay for 3 months, and that was kind of the original intention. But there's a little bit of a phenomenon once you short term are recovered, you can start to think that you've got it down and you figured it out, and you sort of forget that it's a really long-term process. The treatment centers are only covering a very small portion of that because you're only there from anywhere from 1 to 6 months. And in my opinion, recovery is a years long thing. And some people would say it's an entire lifelong thing. But he ended up getting out. I shouldn't say getting out. They're not holding anyone against their will, of course, but he ended up leaving and went back to his house where there was a lot of trauma for him, things like that, and ended up relapsing within about a week. And the relapses are the most dangerous period because you don't have the tolerance anymore. But you might lack awareness of that, and that's exactly what happened. Is he ended up overdosing and dying. And that was about 2 years ago now. So that one for me just woke that thing up that was already there. It was already kind of a spark, and then it turned it into a burning fire where I was like, I know that I want to do something in addiction recovery. Now I know that I have to do it today. Like there's no more waiting. I'll always wonder what it's going to be, how it's going to be. And I just knew that I have to start figuring out what that looks like. And I know I've, talking earlier about, hey, I've burned the ships.
Mm-hmm.
I can do that again to start this new mission. I've done it once before. I know how it looks, and I can do it again. And this cause is it has the purpose, right? And this is taking that investment knowledge and then applying the purpose to it, again at this point without knowing how it was going to work out. Discovered a bit of the second stage housing model, which is essentially just sober living, and that's sort of how we came to this model. And then it just from there was a question of, do we want to replicate it? Do we want to change it? Do we want to see if we can make it? And by change it, I specifically mean, can we make it better? Because the addiction relapse rates are like quite depressing. It's not my favorite statistic. So yeah, that basically landed us there. I'll let you step in too, Chris, because I'll go on a tangent for like hours on that one.
Well, you're incredibly passionate about this topic, and
And
that's
it's great to have
what-
the story, Brandon, because
Yeah.
I think everybody can either there are people that can relate to this, that know somebody that's been there, or can can empathize, can imagine what it would be like to have be themselves or have someone that they care about in this situation.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a prevalent thing. It's I haven't met many people that haven't had some level of experience with it, whether it be like direct family or a close friend or something at the very least, right?
Well,
Yeah.
that part there is, I think, that everything that we ended up finding as we started to explore it. So Brandon had, he's much more the burn the bridges guy than I am, right? I'm much more risk adverse. And in my regular work, I work in a lot of iteration and agile mindset and software development. So when we first started kicking around the idea, to be clear, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just evolving the wheel, so to speak. Because one of the things we realized is that there are sober living houses all over. And I'm sure if you Google whatever community you're in, sober living, you'll find houses. The thing that we realized was that most of them, actually all of them that I know of, are generally run by someone who has worked through addiction themselves. And they're not bringing the real estate knowledge of things like joint venture agreements and scalability. So when we started looking at it from a investment model, and this was long before Bigger Pockets was putting down for 2024 sober living as one of their top 5 items, because I think Brad and I will touch on that in a bit. It's not easy. It's definitely not easy, because you're not dealing with traditional tenants who are going to call you when they need a toilet fixed, and you never hear from for months on end. The operational side is incredibly hard, and that's where Brandon's passion really comes out. So, part of our talk today is we want to be very clear. There's a demarcation line between the financial side and then the operational side, but we'll go through both of them because I know people will be interested, because we do get emailed a lot from people who want to set up houses. And so we talk them through the challenges of it.
Yeah, not to discourage anyone, but of course, oftentimes a lot of those people, they'll come in hot and heavy, ready to set something up, and then after a few conversations, they kind of, I see often where they throw their hands up and go, okay, maybe not. And again, the goal is not to discourage people, but I think on paper it seems like it seems a lot better than it is as far as an operation and a business model goes. Like, of course, it can be, but it's not buying an apartment building, putting tenants in, and taking the odd phone call. What actually generates the income is really the operations, and an operational company is not an easy thing to do at any level. And then you tie in the fact that this is an operation that's based around the mental health of people going through addiction recovery, and in their very, very, very early stages too, right? So
yeah. So Debbie, if you're open to it, we'll go through the finance side first, so that people understand how that works, and then we can talk about the operational challenges that we experience.
Sounds good. Did you need to share or anything like that?
What's that? Sorry.
Do you have
or you're okay to talk? Just talk to us.
Yeah, we can talk through it. If Brandon, if you've got the Lumina slides there, otherwise we'll forward.
I have slides that I can.
Yeah, you can go ahead and
Yeah.
share wherever you need to also.
Okay, I can fire those open here and see which one are you thinking, Chris?
I'm thinking towards when you get into the more of the financial stuff towards the end.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we can keep talking until we get there, and then it's available to share.
So the big part of the financial side of things is that it is a traditional JV arrangement from an investor's perspective. So when we set up the first house, we were very intention driven, and it was a lot of alignment around this idea of iteration, right? We wanted to fast fail. I ended up going out to the Keep Aspire Summit, talked to a ton of people there, had people approach me who are in recovery themselves that I had no idea were. And I actually came back quite scared's not quite the right word, but I was definitely much more aware of the challenges that we were getting into. So as I was gonna change my view there. So as we started to explore that, we needed to make sure that we were in a place that would allow us to exit the model if the model didn't work. So knowing Nanaimo well, having grown up there, both of us, VIU is the Vancouver Island University. There's a strong student base and student rental housing in that area. The nice thing, if we want to say that about this, is that the demographics of many of the people that we work with in addiction recovery are the demographics of students or close to it. So these houses fit well in those communities areas without, neighbors wondering about it. I think in our situation, all of our neighbors know, for the most part. I would say most of them do for sure. But it's, you're seeing people coming into the house that are, early 20s more often than not. And we wanted to make sure that we were in a position to fall back onto something which would be student housing if this didn't work out. So when we get into the JV structure, The JV structure is a bit more complicated than a traditional JV, but effectively from either the person who provides us the mortgage, right? Because we're generally using that, or the people who provide a down payment, they have an equity position. So this isn't a prom note, right? There's definitely an equity component behind it. In addition to the ownership in the property, the way the operational company works is it enters into what's called a triple net lease with the property. So for those who work in commercial real estate, this is something they're familiar with them. Residential real estate investors may not know this because this is not something that you really experience when you're dealing with a regular tenant, but we're not renting it to a tenant. We're effectively renting it to a business. It would be no different than renting it to like a daycare, for example, right? From that perspective. So in a triple net lease, that tenant, which is Horizon Recovery, they're responsible for all of the expenses associated with the property, including mortgage payment, property taxes, water and sewer, right? Electrical, gas, telephone. Did I miss any of the big ones, Brandon?
I don't think so.
So Chris, so just to get, so you have then your JV partnership kind of company here. You've got your JV partnership that owns the property, and then you lease it out to your operations company.
That's right.
Correct.
Which is
and then it keeps the separation from a liability standpoint away from the investors as well. Because I mean, investing in addiction recovery operation, aside from structuring it as a limited partnership, it's going to come with additional risks that a lot of investors aren't really excited to take. So this way they're investing in the real estate technically, but they're benefiting indirectly from the operating income from Horizons, the addiction recovery company, and that's because they can afford to basically pay a bit of a premium, pay the rent at a premium, and do the triple net lease where they're taking over, we take over all the expenses where, repairs and maintenance, we're handling it all. That's all built into the lease agreement. So yeah, all the expenses, as Chris mentioned. So it's kind of a neat way to benefit from Horizons, not have to invest directly in them, and you're making your money on real estate.
And the joint venture partnership setup, Chris, is it set up like because they're if it's a financial partner that's providing the down payment and the financing, are they like 50% of cash flow and equity? Like, what does that joint venture partnership split looks like?
Yeah,
Brandon, you want to talk to that?
Yeah, I will. So it's a little bit different. There's like sort of a additional complexity to it because there's an operating company, right? So the operating company itself has to be lucrative because if it was just a tenant in there, you'd collect the money and then that would get split. That's kind of your standard JV structure, right? Hey, we'll split the cash flow, we'll split the equity, the appreciation, the works. With this one, the operating company has to be able to function. So to be able to do that, the operating company profits stay within the operating company. It has its own set of books that are actually irrelevant to the joint venture. It has nothing to do with it.
Right.
Of course, there's a rent that's paid to the JV group, which of course we're a part of as well, right? That's kind of the trade-off, is the benefit of the premium for the equity. So there is an amount of cash flow that goes to the investor group, and actually the cash flow from that lease payment goes directly to the investors, and it gets split amongst them respective for their shares. But we, as the operating partner, we don't actually take our respective percentage of the cash flow because our benefit is basically maintaining the operating income that we're working for. We do, however, split the equity pay down and the appreciation of the real estate, and that's a 50-50.
Okay, so not the cash flow side of things, but when it comes to once you realize the equity in there, you're having a split on that part. So the joint venture partner gets the cash flow side of things, and you get a percent of equity.
Exactly, and it's nice because we can actually create a bit of a fixed cash flow on a monthly basis for our investors, and that's because the lease amount never changes. And so normally you would have your income come in, and then you'd go, oh, but this month we're a little bit short because there was some repairs and maintenance and we had to deal with a leak or whatever it might be.
Or your tenant moved out.
or your tenant moved out, right? So in this scenario, we don't have to worry about that. That affects horizons, and our operating income can fluctuate, and it does fluctuate a lot. We have some decent months and we have some not so great months. That's just kind of the nature of this business. Another reason that anyone getting into it, you definitely want to be passionate about it, because it's about the social work side of things, and it's not, on paper, again, it looks phenomenal, like you're going to be making 10 grand a month or something like that, and if you are, then you clearly could be providing a lot more services to your residents, right, instead of pocketing all that capital. But yeah, so as far as the percentages go, that's a fixed amount that gets paid through the lease to the investor group, and no matter what's happening operationally, that's the same amount. So every month they're going to get their respective shares. So if you're getting, $500 a month, you're getting $500 every month, and that allows us to be able to do cool stuff on our end. Like, we like to subsidize a lot of people coming through our house. It's not the most affordable thing to do. We're a private company. We have to be profitable, and to succeed in that, it's not cheap. There are subsidies available for people if they qualify, and we like to do some of those ourselves as well if we have the capacity to. But we won't have upset investors who are saying, hey, we're not getting our cash flow checks because you're giving people discounts on their room so that they can afford it. So we're able to do that without affecting the joint venture cash flow structure.
So
the other part
yeah.
that's
Okay,
sorry,
sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say that, and the other part that's interesting is that, if being that we're in BC, we have a residency tenancy board, right? And they just announced, was it yesterday or last week, that they're making it even more restrictive to be a resident under the residency tenancy board. You've got May 1st short-term rental restrictions coming in pretty much across the province at this point, right? Those things don't really impact us, because as an investor, you're renting it to Horizons, and Horizons, the people that are coming to stay in the house, for one, they want to come and stay. For two, they have rules that they must follow, right? So they're not coming and sitting on the couch 24/7, right? Like, they're coming there, and they have expectations around things like mandatory drug testing, or maintaining journals, and providing like their daily agendas as to what they're doing, like, to better themselves. And it's about creating community for them and giving them, new skill sets to maintain their sobriety, right? And so when you look at it, it's actually kind of interesting, because I find that the properties are kept in better shape than you do, because really, let's face it, you turn your keys over to that tenant and you hope that the credit check came through good, and that their references weren't their friends lying to pretend that they were their old landlords, all that other stuff. And once they're in there, how hard it is to get rid of them. This is very different, right? Like, these people are there at our request, and they want to be there. And Brandon can talk a little bit more on the operational side of that, but there's a peace of mind there, that you don't have the hiccups that you have with regular tenants. This cash flow is much more stable, right? It's the equity pay down. It's definitely there, right? Nanaimo is great community from the appreciation side, right? Like, especially post-COVID, right? Lots of people from Vancouver moved over there, and now with things like the Hollow, it's becoming actually almost like it's becoming easier to commute from Nanaimo than it is from places like Mission, for example. So it's really expanded the island lifestyle to a lot of other people. So the property values continue to increase too. So these are all like win-wins that were specific to Nanaimo, and then specific to the model. And it just happened that we knew Nanaimo because we grew up there.
So
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on. Sorry, go ahead.
Just gonna. So, I mean, from the joint venture partnership part of it, it's pretty simple, black and white. I love the model, right? There's guarantee. Are the mortgages variable or fixed?
We're fixed on one, and the other one's variable, isn't it, Chris?
No, that one's a fix now too.
Okay,
They're both
so
fixed. There we go.
Yeah,
I
so
should,
because of the fix, then you definitely have, you know what
Yes.
you'll get. If you're
and
variable, then that may
totally.
cause some fluctuation. And from
But not
that
for the investor
side,
group.
are
That's
you
true.
guys looking for not just so you may probably find properties and say, look for joint venture partners, but what if someone has a property and wants to be part, like have their property part of this model with you guys? Is that something you entertain?
It is. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. And the cool thing about Chris and I's background of just the creative investment stuff and Keyspire and the connections that we've made and the stuff we've learned along the way, it allows us to essentially look at, of course, there's sort of a standardized version of this thing that's just plug and play now. But at the same time, opportunity is opportunity, and the opportunity to create more beds for people. If there's a way to make it work, like we want to make it work, and using these creative structures, we're open to various ideas. And it's not so much like, hey, here's what our offer is, take it or leave it. I'm the kind of person, I know Chris is the same, happy to
Mhm.
sit down and say, hey, what are you looking for out of this, and here's what we need, and see if we can make something work. And there's, so as you know, and being in the creative world yourself, there's so many variations and ways to do this. So even renting a space temporarily or doing a lease option or whatever sort of seller participation we can get helps us, and if it helps them, then that's fantastic. The goal is to try and get more beds. There's sort of two real main goals: is getting more beds onto the market, or into the market, and then secondly trying to make it a bit more competitive, so people have to get their prices down, for one thing, to make this more accessible for people. And we look at other various options to be able to do that as well, like subsidies and whatnot.
Well, I'm just thinking that in BC right now, like Chris, you just brought up,
Mhm.
with May 1st coming very quickly, being, no more short-term rentals. There's so many investors that are going to be hit. I know I have, and I've had to change strategies there. So maybe this is something that, if they may want to entertain to do with this property that,
Yeah.
they're not ready to sell it as yet. It's, they
Yeah.
purchased it when prices were high, expecting a higher return, and now market is down, so they're not ready to sell. So this may be an option.
It's a huge opportunity for both sides, I think. I've seen a lot of
Yeah.
people going, oh no, this is what's happening. And it's ruining my business. And for me, it's actually been a massive opportunity, but I'm realizing now it's actually an opportunity for both sides, because a lot of these houses, I mean, they're short term, they're already furnished, they're already set up.
Mhm.
The main factor is one of our biggest criteria pieces for our operations to make sense financially is we are looking for larger houses. Because if someone had a one bedroom, well, we can't have one person isolated by themselves, and the model wouldn't make sense, of course, right? So there's
So how
kind of,
many rooms then is the ideal, Rana?
yeah, so quite large for houses, so they're a bit tricky to find. I would say realistically, based on the requirements for the on the government side and the municipal side of the bylaws, is you're going to be basically 5 to 10. If you're at 5, and it all depends on the price point. I like to kind of look at it as like almost like $100,000 of value per bed. So you kind of want to be in that like 5 beds to 10 bed mark. So if you had a place that's could sustain 8 beds, the metric, that like napkin numbers would be, you'd want to be at the like 800,000 purchase price
Does
for the
beds means bedrooms or just more beds? Like they can
so
have.
so yeah, so basically
Great
bedroom.
question.
Yeah, it is. Because it is a room rental, right? So we are renting the space per bed. So that's mostly per bedroom, but I'm going to say it's per bed, because in each house we want to have one, if the house is big enough, maybe two, but never more, double rooms. And that's mostly for the purpose of, you're going to get some people through that maybe shouldn't be isolated in their own rooms, and have that additional support and accountability while they're staying with us. So in that scenario, you would have one room could technically be 2 beds, right?
Uh-huh.
Well,
So
Brandon, if you want to flip through the slides,
yeah.
I know we've got 1 or 2 properties there, as I recall.
Yeah, so I'll show, let's see
Let me
here.
show you an example.
Yeah, let's see if we can. Hey, there we go. Okay, so this is actually, oh, I don't have the picture of the double bed in here, but yeah, this is the second one that we put together. So this one's fairly new. Um, you can kind of see the number breakdown. I'm not sure how small it's showing up on your screen. It's quite small on mine, so I'm gonna make that a little bit bigger.
It's a 6-bedroom house that we
Yeah,
have about eight beds, as I recall,
yeah,
is how it works
that's
out.
yeah, including the downstairs and the extra space as well. Um, and then let's see, I'm gonna drop down one more here. This will show you kind of our pilot project here. This is the very first one that we did in Nanaimo. So some information there as well. A bit of this one's nice because this one we've actually had for just over a year now, and so these numbers are like our real numbers. I will say too, I kind of want to talk about this quickly because this sort of ties into another conversation that I think is a popular one right now, an unfortunate and popular one right now. You'll see in this one we have like the cash flow here is quite significant. Um, and if you actually account for our guarantor, like our mortgage guarantor partner, we actually the cash flow on this that we pay out is like closer to $2,000 a month, which is crazy for a single family property. Typically, when single family properties cash flow in our market, you were getting like you were excited for $500 was kind of like the metric. Like, got to find a house that cash flows about $500.
Mhm.
And when we first started looking at this model on paper, it looks so good that I'm going, holy smokes, we can pay insane cash flow and we can be so absurdly competitive. Like, who's getting $2,000 a month in cash flow on a single family house that they don't have like and triple net lease on top of it? Like, that's wild. They don't have to worry about anything. It's just the whole. It was one of these things where I was quite excited about that aspect of it. And the reality of it is as we went down the path, we were realizing that I don't want to say we gave too much up, like we wanted to keep more for our side. It wasn't about that. It was about we were putting our deal at risk. And we were offering way more than we really needed to, especially to attract investor attention. But again, I was like, hey, it's there. I want to be fair about it. We're going to be making some pretty significant cash in this. Let's pay out some decent returns. And as we sort of move forward, you'll notice that our returns and our cash flow values here that we project have dropped. And that's not so much a performance-based thing. That itself has been a whole nother thing to figure out, just with the operational side. But the reason that I'm catching myself going, oh my gosh, we have to change something, and we are now, is mostly like it's the sustainability. Is like this is something that we want to keep expanding on. And I'm going, hey, if we're giving that, and we're fine to give this up in the initial phases, of course, we want to get that investor that wants to take a chance on a model that we at that time haven't even proven yet. But moving forward, it just was being noticed that as we expand and we start bringing staff in and we start wanting to add more properties, we become a bigger operation and we start gaining more overhead. And as that happens, our company is at risk and it can't sustain to pay these amounts of cash flow. So the reason we're reducing that now and reducing the offering is mainly so that we can scale this thing without risking all of it collapsing. And the reason I mentioned how this ties into the kind of other conversations is we have seen a lot of, and this is more in the higher risk sector, these high return deals failing. And they're high risk and they're paying out crazy amounts of money that they probably had no business really offering in the first place because we really had a huge greed phase for everybody, everybody, right? It was the
Mhm.
whole market was booming. We're all making money. We thought we could be paying people crazy kinds of money, and we forgot about like the sustainability of our deals and is it really realistic? And can you actually scale on that, right? Maybe it works for deal, maybe it doesn't, but does it work for the long term? And we're seeing now that it's not working for people. And You know, so for us, it's really about taking something we're passionate about. You know, of course, I want to make my investors as much money as possible. And if there's some way to pay out more at the end of the whole thing, then great. Of course, I that's something that we do. But we just really want to focus on getting a return that's still fair. And I believe that it is, because we're not talking about an extraordinarily high risk project here. We're talking about stable single family assets with plan B and C, basically, right? To shift over if this doesn't work out, if Horizons has to fold for whatever unforeseen circumstance.
Right.
So yeah, we're really kind of changing the model here. But I do believe that, you know, in comparison to our initial offer, that was great for anyone that got in at the beginning. Every new startup is always going to be the best time to get in on the investment, right? And we're sort of pulling back on that. But comparably to the standard deal today, I still think that it's actually quite competitive for a single family acquisition.
Definitely, it's still, you know, you way more than you would get with in a normal investment, and it's better to under promise and over deliver.
Exactly, 100%. And that's a big one. That's a real big one. Is we've seen a lot of that, like tying back in that conversation, a lot of that not happening
Mhm.
the last little bit. So it's something we're just really trying to focus on right now. Is that we're in this sort of crucial market moment where the market's not supporting people's deals anymore, and now it comes down to the power of the actual reality of the deals. And so if we can adjust and make them make more sense, I think that we have, you know, just a great chance on really developing this thing and being able to get more investors. That, because that's one of the downsides is, you know, having been raising capital for what am I, 8 years now, I've partnered with some friends that have, you know, been involved in much bigger projects and done some fairly large capital raises. Uh, Now with these projects, it's sort of, we're sort of plugging one in at a time, and then there's like this like 6 month to 12 month gap. So there's only ever these like cash requirements for like $250,000 every
Well,
six
I
months.
love that you're doing
Let's
this
see.
too. I think that a lot of people are getting themselves in trouble because they're scaling too quickly.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah,
just going too fast, and this like you know, it's just not sustainable. And I love that you're doing it slower, create stability in the investment that you have before you
yeah,
then try to do another one. There's
yeah.
And
nothing to prove to anyone to try to get like $100 in 1 year. That's
No,
crazy.
yeah, it
and I
is.
think
It is.
it's really important to, like, you know, we're using the word project. Um, but we have to be very conscious that this isn't a land development deal, right? Like there are people that are relying on this and their families are relying on this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not from an investor perspective, but from the guest perspective who's in the house.
Yeah.
So, you know, we wanted to be really diligent in putting them first when it came to structuring the deals. So when we did the first house, um, everybody who's involved in that was a very heart-centric people, right? Like our one of our biggest investors is a doctor in the Lower Mainland. He has absolutely nothing to do with the real estate investment community, right? But in his patients, he deals with this sort of stuff. And when we were talking to him, he had commented, he says, you know, I buy properties in like Las Vegas. And he goes, they don't yield this. And I know what the value is to this. So we've been very diligent in that iterative process to say, okay, let's take a step forward, see where this goes, tweak it, adjust it, which is what we did as we rolled into the second house, which was about 9 months later. And that house is operational upstairs, and we're just finishing up the downstairs section of that right now. And then now and we were also intentional in, you probably noticed the previous picture in the right hand corner. Both of these houses were women only housing.
Mhm.
And that was also by design, because as we kind of had access now through Brandon's friend passing into the community of people who work in this area, men often introduce additional challenges around anger management in their addiction story, right? Women, you know, get clicky and that sort of stuff, but there's usually not, you know, nobody's punching holes in walls, right? So from there, that's where now like the Lumina project is now shifting into looking at men's housing, right? Because we've now have been working with people who've provided like a blueprint, so to speak, or explaining, what they went through to help set up their houses. And I think that's the other part that, we can touch on too, is the community of people who operate in the operational side of this is very small and very connected. So that's where, choosing to concentrate in Nanaimo has been great, but there is also an opportunity that, Brandon can get more into, of going outside of Nanaimo as we continue to scale up. And that's where, let's face it, every community has this challenge, right? Like Brandon and I talked about this in the beginning, that in a perfect world, we would put ourselves out of business, right? Like I would love to get to the place where there is no addiction problems and that we are able to do that. But the sad reality is this is a growth business right now.
Exactly. It's growing.
And
It's not getting smaller. Yeah.
exactly. And if we can do something to at least help to stabilize it, even if it's in just one community, right? Like we're supporting approximately 16 individuals now across the two houses. And that's 16 moms and dads and 16 kids, because most of them have kids and everybody has parents who are also benefiting and seeing the results from it. So it
So
truly
let's
is
get into
win-win.
we've talked a lot about the investment side of it. So that's pretty, it's pretty clear cut on the investment side of it, but not the operational side. So I'd like to hear more about this part of things, because it's not something someone can just jump into and say, I'm going to go like Brandon did. I'm going to do so for it.
Yeah.
So
Burning the bridges isn't the easiest thing to do.
not everybody's Brandon Lawson.
It can be fun to do sometimes.
So what do people, from an operational side, what do people have to think about and consider?
So, and before I kind of get into that, I just wanted to mention too, we're sort of missing a key person here in the conversation. And in this whole process of me losing one of my best friends, I reconnected with another friend from high school who was a friend of his as well. And we hadn't seen her for about 10 years, and we reconnected at his funeral. And then we ended up actually going out for a bite and catching up. And this is one of the major pieces where this all came together, because she is one of those kind of, she's a go-getter. She likes to take control of her life. She just unfortunately had a really, 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 really unfortunate problem with addiction that took her through a lot of challenges. Like I did speak with her about this, and she has given me permission to kind of discuss a little bit about her story. But it actually ended up that she was on a medication through the hospital, through the medical system, and she ended up getting addicted to the medication when they pulled her off of it. And she started discovering that the key thing that she was basically getting from it was a synthetic heroin. So she discovered basically street heroin, and from there fell into a crazy, unfortunate addiction that got her into a lot of trouble, a lot of mess. She ended up, downtown East Vancouver for a lot of years, ended up getting involved in a lot of sort of, different activity, criminal type activity, abusive relationships. She had been, shot like a lot of times. She's been stabbed. She was kidnapped for 2 weeks and blowtorch, like horrible things that are like disturbing things to discuss. So maybe I'll dial back on the details there. But like a really, really unfortunate story. And she came out the other side, and she really did that through the addiction recovery community, who her mom actually was significantly involved in, and actually opened up the first female recovery house in Nanaimo quite some time ago. So she did have some support, but her mom couldn't do anything until she was ready to come back. And so when she was ready to come back, she had the support. Through that support, she healed a lot of those wounds, overcame crazy traumas, as I just mentioned, and And when we connected, we were so aligned on wanting to do something about this. And with my expertise at the time of, the real estate structuring and the capital raising and all of these things, and her familiarity with the NA and AA community, which is a pretty tight knit community. They have each other's back. It's awesome. But she's got all those connections, and then including her mom. We decided that, hey, for the operating company, we should really team up and have, me on the sort of business development side of it and her on the operational side of it. So she's actually the one that's doing because right now we're women's housing only. We will be doing men's housing, but she's running the day to day. So she's there with these girls. She's back and forth between the two houses. Every single day, every morning she's doing meetings with all of them. It's a full on thing. She's driving them to meetings. She's getting them there basically, if they like make sure the house has everything that they need as well. She's doing incredible work with them, and she's able to do that, and she's able to reach them at such a deep level because of the degree of adversity that she's experienced. She can relate to these people like most people can't. So I don't want to ever minimize anyone's education, but you get people who, hey, I took some counseling courses and I think I want to jump into addiction recovery and start helping some people. I love and respect that they want to help people, and they will. But in my experience, I'm like always quite amazed at the ability of someone who's been through that themselves. They're able to really get to people at a whole nother level. So having her on as a partner has been incredible. We've also hired her mom as well. And she's very experienced because she's been operating women's housing for a very long time in Nanaimo. And on top of that, the biggest thing for these operations to succeed is, again, they're private operations. So we don't have government funding. We can't be giving up free beds as much as I would love to. For this operation to work with the amount of overhead it has, there's quite a premium to get access to a support bed, basically, right? And so, and that's something else that we're working on trying to get down. But the biggest thing is you're charging these prices. So everyone thinks, oh my gosh, let's do this model. It's going to be so easy. Look at the money we can make. But now you have to go out and you got to find, like, a lot of people need help. A lot of people need a bed, but how many of those people can afford to pay to even get access to one? And it's not, the reality of that was one of the biggest challenges. It was like a huge kick to the teeth where we're like, oh my gosh, the demand's going to be crazy because addiction is so prevalent that this, like, and again, we want to support and help people genuinely, but we still had to think about the financial side. And now we're going, oh my gosh, it's, maybe not going to be the easiest thing to fill beds. And we did very well. And the reason for us in particular is because we had people who were already so deeply rooted in the community that already had the connections. Because it's not about, oh, I go to AA meetings every now and then. It's like, do you know, like, for example, our employee there, who's Emerald's mom, she's out for breakfast and coffee with the people who own the treatment centers. She's a part of that network at such a big level that having that connection got us on a lot of priority list that had we not been on, I don't know how we would have pulled this thing off, because at the rates that you have to charge to make it make sense financially, and then you add on top of that aspect that it's not the most accessible thing, and you have to have all these connections. And if you have those connections, are they prioritizing your house? Because it's not like 10 people are leaving treatment every day. They sort of phase people out of it, and then into our houses, and not everybody goes from treatment to a second stage. A lot of people don't. A lot of people go from a rehab straight back to independent living.
Into their community, into
right?
their life.
So,
Yeah. So Brandon, what I'm hearing is that there's not an organization that you're working with that will be paying you for these beds.
No, and what I will say though is something that's been quite incredible is there is government funding. We're a private company. We don't receive that directly, but we do have residents that qualify and they get subsidized through a government entity. Most typically it's the Indigenous band. Like, the band is like awesome for it. So we've had them, like, quite a significant amount of well, for example, we had two in recently that were there for 6 months. and they were both 100% subsidized for the entirety of their
So
stay.
do you help those people to see if there's subsidy for them and help them fill it in? Because I can't imagine that they know themselves where they
No,
could.
and we will, but in most circumstances, they'll typically already be plugged into it.
Okay.
The ones that do qualify, especially if it's through the band, I think a lot of people have already received their subsidies to get into treatment, so it just extends past the rehabilitation center into
Okay, I see.
the second stage.
So it's something that's already been approved for rehab, and then it takes them further. And
Yeah,
what I'm hearing too is that you got in touch with treatment centers. You got on,
you
like
have to.
you built a
Yep.
relationship with the treatment centers.
You have to, and it's such an important piece, and this is why, I was so discouraged at the beginning of this, because I sat down with a guy who owns a men's house here locally, and I introduced myself and I told him what I want to do, and he's a pretty like forward kind of guy, and he just looks at me, he goes, "You're not gonna," he's like, basically told me I'm gonna fail, and I was like, "Excuse me?" Like, that was like, whoa, and right, and I was like, maybe it's just limiting mindset. I don't know where it came from, but it kind of panicked me a bit, and I was like, well, why do you say that? And he goes, because I don't know you. And I was like, well, how does that translate? And he's like, because I'm a huge part of the recovery community. He's like, if I don't know you, it means you're probably not a part of it. And if you're not a part of it, he's like, I don't know how you're gonna fill a single bed, dude.
Because
It
it's
was like,
close knit, like, yeah.
it's very close knit, and and there's a lot of prioritizing. And and it was sad. It was a scary moment, because like, for me, I was like, oh man, like I do have this past with addiction, and I just never really went that route of going through the recovery process and the NA meetings and the treatment centers. So for me, I was like, I'm not a tourist who's trying to come in and get involved and find someone who maybe is involved and try to place them. Like, this is something real for me too. And so that was that one kind of scared me, and it kind of gave me a reality check, because again, you go, oh my gosh, this is what they charge. Like, zoomed out on paper, it's like, this is what you can charge, or you have to charge, really, is what it is. And then you're going, there's so much demand, because we'll look at addiction, and then the reality wasn't exactly that. You add in that you're super transient. And so, like, I'll give you an example of, like, you know uh that, okay, your numbers are pretty good when you're at full capacity, so you try to maintain full capacity, but maintaining full capacity is a very difficult thing to do as well, because the stabilization process, for example, is you have one person come in, and then, oh, we have another one that's coming through that would like to stay at your place, but she's with us for another 3, maybe 5 more weeks, so then that person's not even in for that time, and then they come in, and this person might be leaving, and they're like, oh, we didn't even get the 2 people because they're one in, one out, and you're
Well, so it's a big scheduling
so
around that.
stabilizing is insanely difficult to do.
Yeah.
If I were to give any advice to anyone that is doing it, is like, you're better off discounting a bunch of beds to try to fill them up as quickly as you can. And it's like, sure, your business might not afford it, so make sure you have your capital like runway prepared for that loss, but you're better off having beds at a discount than constantly one in, one out, and then you're never getting to that stabilization. And that when you stabilize it with the discounted cost, when people start replacing those people, then you can bring it up to where it actually has to be for your company to make sense financially and to be able to cover your costs. So that's kind of the best tip there, but it's something that you still deal with, because even once you're full, that's awesome. And then you might have a point where it's like, I'll give you an example. We had 2 people that were leaving at the same time, because they were both for a 3-month stay, and then one of them relapsed, and then boom, 3 people gone. And now your income is like gone.
Mm-hmm.
Just like that month, you're like, oh my gosh. Like, it's so it can be volatile, and that's why you have to make sure you structure the deal in a way that the operating company can support that volatility and always be able to make the payments, right? The investor payments, the mortgage at every level. So that's kind of that fine line that we had to figure out. And we did it successfully, but it came with like some scares where we're like, is this going to be sustainable? Like, what if you can't make payments? And that was initially, the startup was just quite stressful, because I hadn't done this aspect of it yet. And as far as our other partner Emerald goes, she's understands that world and that side of it, but not that he hasn't been through that
Not the
process.
business side.
not the business side. So we were both kind of going, oh no, right? So it takes a bit to get a system going. And that was the biggest challenge, is like thinking that this place would be stabilized and going smoothly in like 2 months was like the biggest illusion I created for myself, because it took a lot longer than that. Um, but it's
It's the
good.
same. I mean, it's the same concept we have with short-term rentals, the same concept we have with midterm rentals. Because if you're doing month like 30 days plus or whatever,
Yeah.
somebody leaves in the middle of the month and no one wants to come until another, month and a half. You've got
Yeah.
this gap that you can't fill anybody in between. It's always crazy. So yeah, so we've got to be, and that's the one thing is that yes, real estate, the plan is to get us to our dreams, and it can in the future, but it's not this magic wand. There's no magic bullet. It's not a like it's gonna happen today. There's trials you have to go through, there's failures you're going to take, there's lessons learned that you're going to have. And that be prepared for it and be realistic.
Absolutely. And I think that's another good reason to like do the whole investing with purpose thing, because if that purpose really does mean something to you, you're going to be so dedicated to it. And if you realize that no matter what, you have to go through those reality checks, you're kind of getting those kicks to the teeth at every corner when you're setting up any company, right?
Mhm.
There's this idea that it's just like easy money. It almost seems like in certain communities where it's like, here's like you said, the sort of the secret sauce to it all, right?
Yeah.
And I
There's so
think,
many coaches and supposed
yeah,
gurus
yeah,
out there that's
hey, can you invest
promising
$1 million?
financial freedom and you're gonna
Yeah,
get this overnight, and it doesn't exist. That's
such
not
a
true.
grind. It's such a grind. And I think if you
Yes.
add the purpose aspect to it, it's like you're just going to be dedicated at another level. Because I see people often where I think this is where the money is, and then they do it for a bit, and then they take those initial kicks of the teeth, and
And they
they go,
give
okay,
up.
well, maybe it's over here, and then no, maybe it's over here, and maybe it's over here, and then they spend a lifetime doing that. And it's like having the purpose behind it just gives you this extra drive to like really see it through. And if you want it bad enough, you're not going to stop. You're going to be a lot more relentless, right? And you're
Mhm.
going to go through those challenges. I would love to say that I found something that didn't have those challenges and that we had the secret here, because I know it's a lot of people sell. It's a bit of a sales strategy of,
Yeah.
hey, we found the way to do it, and there's a lot of aspects that are benefits to what we do, but there's also a whole reality
Mhm.
behind it. That's
I'm just looking at the time. So,
yeah,
and I know we can talk about this for ages because
yeah,
I love anything that's, helping others. I could talk to about to forever, but I wanted to ask a question around regulations.
yeah.
So do you have to have, like, are these homes regulated? Are they being, is anybody coming to check on it? That sort of thing.
Yeah, so as far as the regulations goes, there's sort of a couple different variations of structures that people use. And I will say they're regulated in the sense of like you have your rehab centers, rehabilitation centers, your where people are going for their initial treatment,
Mhm.
detox, and then they'll be there for usually a month to 3 months is probably pretty standard on average for them. So we'll often get a lot of them coming through our houses because they're going to be referring people over to us. So they typically want to see what are we offering. They want to do a walk through the house, because unfortunately there's a lot of advantage taking in this industry. It's something that's sadly enough, it's just not very enforced. There is a governing body that actually is supposed to enforce it. It's just not doing what it should right now, and they're kind of changing that a little bit now. But there's a lot of people getting away with some pretty unfortunate stuff using this business model. And then as far as like that government level inspection, it is a Health Canada licensing that's
Okay.
required for places that are offering a certain level of service, like counseling, things like that, directly.
Mhm.
It's like, our company offers counseling, our company offers this. And that is a bit of a process. I know, like, depending on who you ask, it could take up to a year, or as quick as 3 months. They're pretty good about it in letting people who are operating without one to let them sort of slowly integrate in towards licensing. So the two options are basically, if you want to do the full meal deal and provide as much value into your house as you can, or to the residents in the house as you can, then you're going to want to go through that licensing process. if you wanted to just remain sober living, where it's more about just kind of a safe room where people have accountability and someone to come and check in on them and to support and encourage them following their treatment plan that we don't offer. And you know, they get that through the rehabilitation center that they're coming through. So we kind of encourage that. However, if you wanted to create your own treatment plans, you'd be kind of becoming a little bit closer to a treatment center yourself, and that's where you're going to require that licensing. And there's inspections involved, and you have to have, they basically give you, I have the book, it's like a huge book of like all of the criteria you have to meet, and it's pretty significant. It's all good stuff though. It's, you know, a lot of people kind of go scoff at it and they don't like it, but if you read through it, it's all stuff to make sure that the residents are going to have a good and safe experience. And you know, people don't like jumping through the red tape, but in this scenario, it's one of those ones where it's like, well, why wouldn't you? Especially if it just creates a better program for you, and it creates more, you know, because a lot of it is just the right documentation, the right sort of disclosure. So when you're like doing an orientation with someone coming in, that they're just getting all the information required. They know what to do. If they're having a problem, they know where everything is, the escape plans, like fire escape plans. Like you kind of start to create a bit of a commercialized business once you go down the licensing path. So yeah, there is a regulating body. The interesting thing is like, it's actually, because I remember when I was first starting this, going to the city and being like, hey, what's like the bylaws on rooming? And they're like, well, it's up to 5 people for a residentially zoned, like a single family residential home. You can have up to 5 individuals occupying rooms, and you can't exceed that. And then, well, what if it's addiction recovery? And then it's completely actually out of their hands, and it becomes it's a provincial level there, and you can actually with licensing have up to 10 people. And as far as like those other bylaws goes, it sort of skirts around the municipal level, because anytime I tried to get information from, they're like, it's kind of just out of our hands. And I was like, well, who do I talk to? And they're like, I think you talk to the province, but we don't really know. And I was like, oh my gosh. So figuring that out was kind of a bit of a battle too, right? Because it's like, well, how, I don't want to do this in the wrong way and then have to double back and try to correct all these mistakes, right? But it's, yeah, it's oddly underregulated, which, I mean, there are sort of predatory type people out there that definitely think that's a huge benefit, but I don't know that it is, because like I said earlier, there's, and I won't get into those details because they're quite horrible. And but there's a lot of
Our community wouldn't be doing that. They want to do it the right way. So
100%, right?
Yeah.
And the more of these that we can be putting together and actually doing this the right way, the more we can hopefully put these other businesses to bed, because it's, yeah, it's really bad. It's and I don't,
well, I was going to add, like the rehab center, when they come to do an audit, right? They're reviewing stuff like, how many beds do you have, right? Because, you know, the predatory side of things, the more beds I have, the more money I can make.
yeah,
And so if I can stack them to the roof, great.
yeah,
So they'll come in and be like, okay, well, you know, this makes sense. This is a large master bedroom that can fit 2 singles. Perfect, right? But you're not able, you know, we're not in a position, nor would we want to over capacity the houses, right? So that's why it's kind of like about 8 beds for 5 bedrooms, because usually there's, you know, 2 or 3 bedrooms that are larger that we can comfortably put 2
beds in there.
right?
Yeah, you wouldn't do that in like a rancher style. Like these are like, you want to have multiple kitchens, multiple bathrooms, right? So it's sometimes beds isn't the entire metric. You know, it's like 5 beds, you can fit X amount of people if you have the other space, the yard space.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
spaces
and the bathrooms.
Yeah, especially when you got women, right?
Bathrooms, definitely. So one last question, and then we'll go into, and then we'll talk about how to contact you guys, right?
Yeah.
But from a like a property management perspective, how often do you do inspections?
Yeah, so honestly, it's kind of an everyday thing, because as I mentioned, we have Emerald there, who's there on a daily basis doing the morning meetings, and now we have Emerald and Goldie. They're sort of divide and conquer right now. So you know, they're quite on top of that side of it. They're there at the property, so which is great, because you know, sometimes you get tenants who they just don't actually call you when the toilet's been leaking for 4 months. This we know things,
and your water bills are sky high.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, yeah, those are quite high anyways. It's
It's a lot of
that,
showers,
that's one of the
right?
other challenges with kind of doing the rooming style thing is you had a lot of people in there, right? So it's
Mm.
it can definitely have an effect on the hydro bill and the city
But
utilities for sure.
but we do have, the property manager in terms of the house manager, like Emerald or Goldie is there pretty much every day.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you should have in this operation model like a house manager that's checking in.
Yes.
You have
Yeah.
to,
And
yeah, you
that's
have
what you definitely do. And that's one of the reasons we have the houses relatively close together, right? In what's called, it used to be called Harewood, but it's now the Vancouver Island University area, right? So they're all within a few blocks of each other, which allows that one person to have some scalability. Outside of that, the guests are under things like a curfew. So we have, door sensors and cameras externally and that sort of thing, so that we know when people are coming in and out, and we know if someone has like an unauthorized guest coming to stay, right, or showing up to visit, that sort of thing. So there is a lot more checks and balances, which I would say in many ways is probably, for a regular investor, I would say it's a little bit more closer to like an Airbnb model in that way, that
Mhm.
where through the doorknob, right, who's showing up at your rental property as a short term, and you're like, wow, there's supposed to be one guest and 7 people are at the door. How interesting, right? And so we don't normally have those issues because Emerald and Goldie are so on top of it.
Mhm.
Um, and everybody knows that they're right nearby. So it's not like you're living in Vancouver and buying a property in New Brunswick and hoping that the tenant's actually taking care of the place. Like and that it obviously adds to the operational overhead too, which is one of the reasons that it's really not as profitable as the top line numbers look like when you see, oh, you can charge this per bed. Well, yeah, but appreciate that all of these other expenses are there
It
too.
has to be in here. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I'm just like blown away and so excited about this topic. Thank you so much for coming, Brandon and Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
How
Thank
can
you.
people get a hold of you to find out more?
Like some hide and seek style stuff. Yeah, you have to find me.
Just go to Nanaimo, look around, ask for Brandon.
Yeah,
Probably 100,000 people.
Well, I think Brandon and I were talking, and so I'm going to edit in. So in these slides, we're going to provide how to a bit of contact
yeah,
information for you,
that'd be good. I can throw you an email and then
and then maybe a booking calendar link
exactly.
for
Yeah, you can do
someone that
that.
wants
And
it.
then,
So
yeah,
there's two opportunities here. And so one would be anyone that might want to be on the JV partnership side of things. And then the other is maybe anyone that wants to find out how to do the operational
Yeah,
side.
absolutely.
Right.
And on the JV side, there'd be 2 tiers of that too, because we have both investors who help on the cash side of things, right? Who are coming in with a cash component to help with either the down payment or the operational side. And then on the other side of that is also someone who holds on to the mortgage.
Okay.
So we have, it's in both the houses, we have people that have excess mortgage space, and for various reasons, maybe they're investing primarily outside of Canada at this point in their investment journey, or maybe they own their own property they live in and make sufficient money through their regular job and have no interest in owning a standalone investment property on their own. Then that gives them an option to use that. And
You can use their qualifying power.
exactly.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
they're getting an infinite return using the bank's money to make money because we all know the
Yeah.
bank that with
Right,
ours
doing
too.
the qualifying
Yeah.
power on
Yeah,
there. So
yeah,
awesome. Oh,
absolutely.
thank you so much. I am so excited about this particular strategy, and I hope that it will not only for sober living, but it will also help people to start thinking about what is something they're passionate about and how can they bring that into their real estate journey.
Yeah, that can be a game changer for
That
anyone.
investing with purpose,
Absolutely.
right? So
Exactly.
awesome. Thank you so much,
for the
Brandon and Chris. Have a
Appreciate it.
wonderful day. What is
Yeah.
left of the day?
Yeah. Cheers.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
See you.